Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared a 3-day ceasefire in the war on Ukraine to mark the 80th anniversary of victory in World War II. The U.S. has criticized the move, with President Trump seeking a permanent end to hostilities and a peace deal. Joining us now is Bloomberg's team leader for Russian economy and government, Tony Halpin. So interesting that, well, I would say two things. Number one is that President Putin has announced yet another, what he calls short-term ceasefire, temporary ceasefire. It reminds me of what was announced around Easter, but of course then there were multiple violations. But then what's notable has been the U.S. reaction. Because we heard from the press secretary yesterday, and she suggested that actually the U.S. were disappointed that Russia's side are only looking for temporary ceasefire as opposed to permanent.
Yeah, and that was very notable because, as you've noted before, Russia has announced temporary ceasefires. There were accusations on both sides of breaches. But I think what lay behind this disappointment was the fact that the Trump administration was pushing very hard, as we know, for some kind of permanent ceasefire within the time frame of Trump's first 100 days. And Putin's decision effectively pushed that back another 10 days, took out the wind from the sails of the Trump effort. And I think that's fueling the disappointment in the White House.
What could be the next steps that the Trump administration undertake to try to get a deal across the line now?
Well, I think what lay behind those comments was increasing frustration in the Trump White House at the lack of willingness of Russia to sign up to a ceasefire. And President Macron of France indicated as much in an interview which was published earlier today, saying that he hopes to persuade Trump to push Russia a bit harder by threatening sanctions and by threatening some measures. So it may well be that the Trump White House is in fact weighing up whether it needs to adopt a tougher stance towards Putin.
And of course, we need to talk about that very special, notable meeting that took place between President Trump and President Zelensky at the Vatican around Pope Francis's funeral. Pictures all over social media, obviously. Do you think that could have marked a turning point in terms of how President Trump is thinking about what happens?
Well, certainly President Zelensky intimated that it was potentially a turning point that came away. He said, having had very good talks, the White House called it positive. And following on from that now, there's this disappointment with Putin. So we may begin to see a slight change in the narrative between the US and Russia. And the US until now has been very willing to listen to Russia and to make concessions. And so far it doesn't really have any reciprocation from Putin. It hasn't received anything from Russia that would justify those kind of concessions. So it may well be that they are beginning to think, well, we need to adopt a tougher line here.